on New Realities. Welcome to New Realities. This is Alan Steinfeld. I know I've been doing a lot of programs about UFOs and disclosure, but now I'm going to go back to a series I started last year, which is about the awakening of Kundalini. And today I have a really special guest, a good friend, an old friend from India. Actually, we met at a place we all kind of were gathering to learn some special techniques. This is Suraya Erikkson. Suraya, thank you.
Alan. My favorite MC in the world.
Your favorite what in the world? Person?
Yeah, person too.
I missed the thing you said. Your favorite
MC.
MC. Oh yeah. I am. Okay. But I want to talk. Thank you. I want to talk about what you've been going through and what you're here to teach the world. Do you want to just mention the workshop that's coming up for you?
I'm teaching at the end of August from the 27th to 29th, an intensive about awakening the Kundalini and the arc of the Kundalini. What happens, the signs that you're about to possibly pop open, what happens when you do pop open, and, the greatness of it. But there's also some areas where I wish I had had a bit of a guide during that time. So that's what I'm trying to do, is help people along their awakening.
So you want to talk a little bit about then how you know you're about to have a Kundalini experience, and what you can do to start to create one, right. And is it a good thing?
The Kundalini
yes.
is the most amazing seminal experience of my life. And I had several openings and several peak, wonderful, huge heart openings prior to, but this takes the cake. This awakens your inner guru. This catapults you into complete new perceptions, into the unknown in a different way, into peak experiences, into having continual epiphanies. And it is, to me, as well as to anyone who has actually really had a Kundalini awakening, we all come with the same message, that this is the evolutionary force of man, because it's the evolutionary force of consciousness.
Okay, let's talk about what happened to you and what actually, I've done lots of shows on it. I know what it is, sort of. What exactly, you weren't quite, I was going to say you're a normal person, but you weren't quite a regular person. You were into yoga and mantras and Eastern understanding and spirituality. But what happened to you specifically that awakened?
Well, what happened specifically, I'm going to say that I think it was my destiny. I think it was my time to wake up no matter what. The actual catalyst was I went to a masseur who was an energy catalyst. There's certain people that they're born with this ability to help us open our channels. And these people do. This particular one is hardly did anything, hardly touched me or worked on me, but yet that was the catalyst to awaken an energy that was ready to be awakened. When I was driving to his place, I was literally going into an altered state. That's part of the reason I know that it was like my time. It was a destiny thing. At the time, actually, I was not being too good with my practice, and I was going through a very stressful period. And it was ready. But I had a lifetime since I was 13 of preparing my vessel, so to speak, through meditation, through yoga, through working with other energy catalysts that could be gurus or healers. So I'd had Shakti pop before. Like I said, I'd already had many, many incredible experiences, but this takes the cake. So.
Well, okay, you're going to like a massage, right? Is that it? You're going,
and there was no preconceived notion, which for me was beautiful. I had no clue.
You were going for a session, right? You were going for a session.
Because I was going through a breakup. Actually, my physical therapist I wanted a bodywork session with her. And she said, no, you need to go. I think you're ready for a heart opening. But she didn't tell me anything more. She goes, I just took a course with this guy, and I think you should go see him. And the first time I went, my body was shaking uncontrollably, but freezing at the same time, because my channels were still closed. Right. But so they were opening. Things were starting to really move. And I'm talking about shaking, like my jaw was chattering. And I'd been to enough healers, had enough, experiences with these energy catalysts that I thought, this guy has something. So between the first time and second time I saw this healer, it was like 2-3 months, because he's that booked in advance.
Right.
And it's weird, because I still didn't ask him, well, what this is about. I thought, I'm just going to go for this experience. So during that time, and everyone's Kundalini experience, there's certain common denominators, and there's certain things, because we're all snowflakes, that are slightly different. For me, I had an incredible, which I have heard with some people, an incredible build of sexual energy. Mm-hmm. And the sexual energy
before the awakening or during the awakening?
Right before the big awakening. The shaking was just the precursor. Mm-hmm. That was to me. And at the time, I still didn't know that it was going to pop. But looking back, in retrospect, you learn, and that's how you can pass on the wisdom.
Right.
So I knew that was something was happening, but there was an incredible build of energy. I started to feel my currents more in my legs. Mm-hmm. And I was actually so kind of even naive to what was going on. I thought, oh, it didn't hurt, but I thought, do I have some kind of pinched nerve or something? Because I'm feeling all these currents run up and down my legs. But then it was the sexual energy buildup was freaking incredible.
And what did you do with all that sexual energy? What did you do?
Well, so I'm glad you asked, because that's everybody.
But I asked too. So yeah, tell me.
To share. So
yeah.
I was actually going through a breakup, but we were still living together, and we hadn't broken up. And it wasn't, sex was not part of the relationship anymore, because the guy was in a fear state and very contracted. He thought for not paying his taxes, he was going to go to prison. And so he's very stressed. Mm-hmm. And so he just wasn't sexual. So for me, this sexual buildup started, and I was incredibly frustrated sexually. But I actually think at the time, it was a really great experience, a learning curve, in the sense that I started to try to pleasure myself, but I was not able to pleasure myself. Like I would masturbate maybe 3 times in a row, and there was no satisfaction. There was no relief. It was that strong. But a voice in my head, which was my inner guru, mm-hmm. which was coming awake, said, right. It wants to go up. It wants to go up. And at the time, like I said, I still didn't get it, mm-hmm. but it kept telling me that. It got to the point where I'm like, well, I'm not even going to, try.
So was the sexual energy just about because of the Kundalini passing through the sexual chakra and opening that chakra up, and that's why you felt the rush of energy there?
Well, the life force energy, it's almost like 2 sides of the coin. The life force God energy is sexual in its base nature.
Well, it's creation, right? It's procreation and creation. Yeah.
Sex drive is one of the biggest, strongest drives in life with all beings. And right. That is the force of creation itself. It's constantly creating and giving birth endlessly, universes. Mm-hmm. So I actually think it was a catalyst for the final push up. There is something really interesting. The energy does go up. It's exactly what they say. It goes from your base chakra, and it shoots up like a geyser suddenly, bursting up. And it's sheer bliss. For me, it just went through my body, shot through my body in a liquid fire bliss. Every single cell was waking up to a new understanding of intelligence, of wisdom. It was like the intuitive body wisdom, which is the life force consciousness wisdom, was waking up in every single cell.
And has that stayed with you, all that wisdom that woke up?
Yes, it's basically, it's kind of like, any cycle of growth. You have this big awakening that it's huge and it's extremely intense. Like at the time when it happened, if I was just conversing with you about it, I would start to go into the full experience. I would be, because there was a lot of heat, I'd start to sweat. I would literally have tears coming out of my eyes in this bliss. And I would start to go, and it would be that strong. And then you get to a point where there's a new normal, a new baseline from which you operate. So let's say the new normal would be having peak experiences becomes just way more normal. You have a new baseline where you might still be sad and feel down, but you have a new point of reference, of connection to your heart, of working with your inner guru. So your baseline when you go down isn't as low. So you kind of jumped up, your lower self and your higher self kind of go up a few rungs in general. And then from there, I still have those peak experiences. For the first, I would say 3 years, it was constant and all the time, and sometimes almost even exhausting because of it. And then you realize why people go into ashrams and they into a little bit more of seclusion, because there's so much going on inside of you, so much learning, so much going into the unknown, that you are going into the inner worlds. Mm-hmm. And so the outer world for a while has to, take a little bit of a backseat so you can focus on that journey. And there's so much going on.
But is this why some people may say, I wouldn't say dangerous, but if you don't have that spiritual background and it just happens, a lot of people don't know what to do. They don't know what's happening. We've had training in that, so we know there is this vital life force, but there probably are people who don't know that, right?
That's why I'm doing this course. There's a lot of people, the yoga community and meditation community, the breathwork community is growing and growing and growing. And I've even noticed people in Kundalini yoga classes really don't understand, Kundalini and what they're really calling into their life. Right. And that's why I'm doing this course, because even though I had been in that world for so long, since I was 13, and I'd read a little bit about it and I knew, but still there was so many challenges to navigate through it, because you are going into the unknown. And that's why I'm doing, this course to share about the ecstasies, but also some of the things that could be challenges and pitfalls. And, there's, I've heard different people talk about it. By the way, I saw the interview with Dorothy Waters that you.
Oh yeah, she was great. What did you think of her?
Cool deal. She really had, I can tell by the way she talks, she had a real Kundalini awakening. A lot of people talk about it, and actually they're not, either they don't know or they're not being honest.
No, I think there's many levels of it, and some people have a mild case. Some people can mistake it for just
that's what I'm saying.
I think most people I've interviewed, it seems like they've had something happen to them.
Yeah. But it's like I said before that, I literally had visions before that. I've had very strong experiences, but this experience, there's certain specific things, and it is definitely much stronger. And there is a debate as to whether it can be dangerous for some people or not. And I personally think that, I haven't met enough people who've actually had Kundalini awakenings to know. I haven't met those people that it can be dangerous, but I do know that even for me, who was prepared, that, some stuff, sometimes it got scary just from the point of going into these states of understanding that are so new.
Yeah.
And you're navigating it on your own.
Right.
So
I don't think it's necessarily dangerous, although some people might think so. I think it needs to be talked about. It is a spiritual emergence that happens.
You know what I'll tell you, which can be dangerous, is not sometimes understanding what's going on. I've heard of this. I've heard of people having awakenings and they actually think they're having a psychotic break. and they go and they are taken to a hospital, or either a mental hospital or a regular hospital, and that can be dangerous. And then if they try to give you drugs or try to suppress it, that cannot be healthy.
I agree with that. And the thing is, this is the divine force flowing through you. This is what people have meditated in caves for years to feel that energy, and it's in our bodies. And sometimes you're ready, sometimes you're not, and it just happens. And some people it doesn't happen to. I've had mild cases of it myself, but I can feel what you're talking about as you talk about it.
Yeah. This is really interesting. I have a friend in India who is a spiritual teacher, and he had a Kundalini awakening. And like we've said, everyone's experience is slightly different. Now, when he popped open, my intuition grew exponentially, but he became one of these people where he would look at someone and he'd know everything about them. And I've traveled with this man, and I know it's true. I've seen him work with people. He doesn't read people. He won't do psychic readings. He only does it for some of his students and his friends, and he doesn't charge. But he is a seer, what we call a seer. So it opened his higher centers to that point. And he tells me that with his students, he can see many people, they've practiced, they've prepared themselves, they've prepared their vessels, and he sees that everything is in line to pop open, and yet they don't pop open.
And why is that? Why don't they pop open?
He says he does. He says that it's what I'm talking. He doesn't know why, but there's this strong force that pops it open. It's maybe, I mean, for me, that's how I experienced it. And for some reason I have, if you want to call it a energetic reflex, that it just shoots up. Mm-hmm. But he says it's that force that shoots it up is something that for some reason, and he doesn't know yet. So if I ever find out, I will happily share.
Well, I think it's not that. I mean, I would say it's karmic. I would say there's a little piece of a trigger that people need to unblock that final level. Right. I think it's genetically part of a lineage hold. I would even think there's some ETs that are stopping that awakening. So
that's really interesting. I want to hear about that, Adam.
Well, there's beings that are supporting us, and those people are keeping the old matrix in place. Okay. And you have to go beyond this matrix in order to have this really free divine energy flowing through you. So how much can you step out of the old matrix into something new is sort of that last little bit that will just boom, pop you open. That's my feeling. So, and sometimes it just happens to people, and sometimes, right, it doesn't. But what I was going to ask you about is your course and how you actually prepare people for this opening. Let me see if I could do a little screen share and you can talk about that. Okay, here is your beautiful graphics. Do you see that?
Yeah.
All right. The Arc of the Great Awakening, the secret of navigating a true Kundalini. I love that picture. Where'd you get that picture from? The flames up the spine.
You know what? I don't know. The graphic person got it. So.
Right. Anyway, talk about then how you prepare people. And in this course, will people have a Kundalini awakening?
They might. It's like we all agree there is a variable as to how and when it's actually going to pop open for people. But it is the way that I popped open. We can only really honestly teach from our own experience.
So what do you teach here, the way you, because you said you didn't really do anything, it sort of came on you.
No, but going to this masseur, in a sense, taught me a combination of working with the nervous system. It is opening up your nervous system is the same thing as saying opening up your channels or your chakras. The chakras and the nadis are centers on your nervous system body that are high. Some of them are more highly charged, meaning they're stronger energy centers that are a stronger catalyst to open up to your spiritual body, to open up to the Kundalini. This is all about opening up your nervous system, your energy channels. So as we know, we're actually going to be working with the senses. Many people say transcend the senses and you experience God, but actually, if we work with the senses, which means sound, touch, breath, it actually is conducive to opening up the nervous system. So some people do breath work, some people do, these sound baths, but what the masseur, who also became like a teacher for me, his name is Thad, in the book that I wrote, God and the Evolution of Orgasm, he basically taught me about this. And so basically I teach a form of working with the high charge points of your body in conjunction with taking in sound, with immersing yourself in sound, in certain sound, and also learning to express the sound that comes out. So we have, and then with also breath work all at the same time.
So what do you do when the energy starts to rise, let's say, and people do experience a lot of sexual energy in your workshops? What do you do about that?
Well, there in the future, I'm going to give a workshop that's more geared towards specifically, the sexual evolution that happens. Because when you have a Kundalini awakening, it's not selective. It takes your whole being with it. And we are sexual beings. We are creative beings. We are created by the creative life force, and we are creative life force beings. And that sexuality, to me, actually, I felt that was part of the impetus, like I said, with that build of sexual energy that was so prodigious, was building and building, because it was building the force to shoot it up for me. And so that's the power of the sexual energy. And then when your channels open, your inner guru comes to life.
It's opening the higher chakras. It's opening.
You can commune with you're going to have more communion with your inner guru. It's going to be louder.
When you say inner guru, do you also mean the higher self? I mean, is that your term for the divine aspect?
To me, the inner guru to me is the higher self, which is, it's kind of like, it's a part of me. I felt that the inner guru, it's like so intimate. It is me. It is me.
More you than your personality, really, isn't it?
But it's basically has the knowledge and understanding of apparently everything. And so it's so intimate. So I could say it's my higher self. I could say it is the conscious life force, God consciousness itself. And yet it's so intimate that it feels like it's me, which it is. But then we do have this vehicle and this individual personality that we work in. So it also, when you awaken to it, it also feels like it's the part of me that always knew everything about me, but I didn't know everything about it. It's like the smaller self and the higher self, and you're expanding into the higher self. And so I call it different things actually because of that. But it has this interesting dichotomy of being me, but so much greater than me at the same time.
Well, I think it is who we really are. I think that is the essence of our being.
Our potential self. That's how I see it.
I see it as a God self. That's how I see it.
Yeah, same thing. That's what I'm saying. I call it higher self. I call it God. I give it different titles because everybody, has different associations to these words.
Right. So this is what is the result of Kundalini awakening, is that access of that greater divine energy comes online.
Yeah, and you know what else also comes online? And this is what I'm saying, that it helps to have understanding, is that your higher self you're going to get in tune with your higher self, but you're also going to get in tune with your shadow self much more. It's going to come on strong. Everything is magnified. So your God self is magnified. one of the main fundamental things that you're going to experience that's going to transform you and your being is the ecstasy. Kundalini awakening, experiencing your essence as your God self essence is ecstasy. It's ecstatic. And that is extremely healing. It gave me a different point of reference to the world. It will just kick you into your heart. You know, talking the whole journey from going to the head to the heart, it is gonna just like boom, you're in your heart.
Are you always in your heart then? Are you, or do you come in and out of that?
Well, I go, see, there's always more. It wouldn't be great if there wasn't more. You know, people go from one box and then they want to put it into another box, and it's not. It's
Right.
suddenly you're in a stream of continual, endless evolution, and you realize that it's going to have more of a feeling of the boundary. You still want boundaries. That's another thing I had to work with, because when you expand into the all, you do have to come back into this life and still have boundaries. But it's an endless growth process, which is a testament to how grand it is. If you could actually bottle it, it would make it small. That's what people, that's what religions have done. And I appreciate so many aspects of religions, because having this awakening and this dialogue with my inner guru and the subconscious, I came into understandings of how certain traditions in religions came to life. Right. Often came from someone who was having an enlightened experience, but then everyone tries to bottle it in a way because our ego seeks a certain type of security. And that's one thing that I talk about you do have to have still a balance of boundaries and being able to, it's more about being able to traverse the dimensions. You can go and open to this higher expanded state, but then you also have to learn to take what you can bring from this expanded state and live it and integrate it with your smaller self. And a lot of people I've noticed on this path, they poo-poo and they denigrate the smaller self. And I don't. We need our boundaries to be here in this dimension. It's about being multidimensional, so it's about integrating it. It's about being able to traverse the dimensions and be able to be more flexible to go back and forth. But going back to the boundaries, religions, like I want to give an example of how you can tell that these religions are based on real wisdom. But again, people make it into dogma and these rules and castigating people and for their basic, for their ignorance. But anyhow, like I'll give an experience. When you open the Kundalini, my heart became open to this ability to have communion with this higher self, with this ecstasy, with this bliss. So communion, that is a ritual in the Catholic tradition. You take communion, they give you a piece of God, and it's supposed to give you communion. You want that closeness, that connection. And that's what happens in the Kundalini experience. It opens your heart to be able to have direct communion, not through a wafer, not through a ritual. Rituals can help us and remind us, but they can inspire us and they can remind us. And sometimes rituals are activators. They can activate, an opening. However, for the most part, in a lot of religions, they've just become stagnant and route,
Well, because they're missing this piece of real divine presence. I think, my theory is that there is this divine being that we're all a part of, but it's not awakened. And particularly there's more evidence of a divine feminine presence that has been here throughout history. She shows up in the Shekinah, the white buffalo calf woman, but it is Mary, Isis, all these manifestations of the goddess are the manifestations of this divine presence. And I think people like you, Suraya, who've had this awakening, you become closer to that higher entity. And so they're actually, it's my theory, coming down through you. They are more present in you in those moments of Kundalini awakening?
I would agree with that. You know, I do feel for me, and I heard that Dorothy talk about that too. There was so much. See, that's what I was saying, that there are certain common denominators. When the Kundalini opens in you, it is an intelligence that starts to blossom in you and teach you. That's the inner guru. And at the same time, it is beyond the intellect. The intellect for me took back seat, and this other intelligence, this conscious life force energy, wisdom came forward.
Right.
More of the guide. It's the same thing as saying, go from the head to the heart. It's the same thing as saying that. So in that experience, it can, the intelligence that is more intelligent than my intellect, than my little ego intellect, will sometimes be, what I like to say is, it will, I'm not meditating, it will meditate me. It flips. It's like your ego's not leading it, your larger self is leading it more. So I'm not making this effort to meditate. All of a sudden, this energy descends on me and says, I'm meditating you. And that's when the experiences get really strong. But that's, your channels are open. Your heart is having, is more open. Your heart channel is more open for communion. And so all of a sudden you could be in the grocery store and you have a divine experience with watching the person walk in front of you, because you're energetically connecting to the world in a sacred way, and in this communion of the deeper ecstatic nature truth that we all are. And you're able to see it from that. And that's what made me see. I'll tell you, it was so beautiful. And yet at the same time, I had to learn patience from this, is that when you're catapulted into this experience, it is like you get to go to the top of the mountain and you can see the future of humanity. And it's so exciting. And you can see the potential that we have if people make this transition and this opening. And you're like, oh,
what is the future of humanity? What is it, do you think?
We have the potential to make this heaven on earth. We have this is the Garden of Eden if we would awaken to it in our hearts. If we can awaken to the energetic communion, to our hearts and to our essence, to our deeper essence, which is ecstatic. It's here. There's nowhere to go. And there's nowhere to go, but you can go everywhere at the same time. There's always these dichotomies. That's another thing I'm going to talk a lot about. People are always
I like that. We need those dichotomies in order to push us beyond our linear logical mind. So so just talk a little bit about how people sign up. Where's the website? Because I think you're inspiring people to be part of this weekend and touch into this.
You can go to my website, which is godorgasms, plural, at gmail.com, godorgasms, plural, at gmail.com. Alan will also be sending out my announcement to his list. So you can
but a lot of people listening are not on the list, but I will put this up on the screen now. And
a website there.
There's a website up at top. God and the Evolution of Orgasm.
Exactly. Well, that's the. I was giving my email, because if they just register based on it, or they can go to my website to check the whole thing out a little bit more. That's
and it's August 27th to the 29th. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Of 2021, because I don't know when people will be looking at this video. So I'll actually put this in the description, this whole flyer here. And of course, your book is called God and the Evolution of Orgasm. You want to explain that a little bit?
Well, what I learned when the Kundalini brought me into my deepest essence and communing with God, it is the greatest pleasure, because it's ecstatic, and it's the greatest orgasm you'll ever have. Getting to know your God self, expanding into communion with your soul, with God, is completely ecstatic. It's completely orgasmic. And it actually did change the bar of pleasure I could feel in life in general, because the pleasure current, once you get in touch with what I call the original bliss, people, you know, some of these religions talk about original sin. The only original sin is it's just a shame that we forgot the original bliss. And but once you open up the channel to God, you open up the ecstatic channel, and that is what people are seeking through orgasm. But it also literally changed my orgasms sexually, physically.
How did your orgasm change, if you want to get personal?
Well, because I would love to share it with you. So,
I'd love for you to share it with me.
so basically, when you awaken your energy body, it adds a new dimension to your sexual encounter. It becomes energetic.
Right.
Experience it. It's no longer so subtle. The subtle becomes not so subtle. And so it's a whole different connection and quality to it. And then also, I started to have different kinds of orgasms. The energy it's moving more fluidly. You're aware of it and awake to it. So it can go from a vaginal orgasm and then move up to your heart. You can have a heart orgasm. I've had heart orgasms, sometimes without the vaginal, but sometimes it goes up to the heart chakra. It's a complete orgasm. Then it can go up to your third eye, and then it can send you actually into a meditative, God communion experience. And so as I have grown in experiencing sexuality and spirituality together, it keeps also evolving as well. So it's literal. It literally transforms you, and literally then you go into the full body orgasms, which are the closest to the communion with God. But it's an amazing, actually, in my journey, everyone gets different directives from their higher self, from their inner guru. And my inner guru literally told me, said, you need to experience this level of bliss and ecstasy and awareness and communion with God at the same time with a physical lover. And so it sent me out to find my tantric lover. And so there's always comedy of errors, because it's life with that, and it's LA. I'm in LA, so there's interesting characters. So it's kind of comical, but it is the next level of life. It can't be intellectual. It has to be experiential. To open up experientially to that connection, that sacred connection with everything, including our sexuality.
Is everyone capable, you think, of experiencing this, or some people depleted energy fields, or is it still a reservoir left in whoever wants it?
That sounds so sad.
No, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of people.
It's going to be way easier for some people. I popped open with a couple of sessions with this guy, but I was prepared for years, and I think it was my destiny. And there's even more. I do think there are genetic components. I think there is, just like you're born with a talent, or the greatest healers are born with it. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So it is going to be easier for some people. However, at our core, this is who we are. So ultimately, we all have the potential to awaken with it. We do have to be patient. I know someone else who worked with the same teacher, this masseur, and it took her like a year. And some people never opened up with him, but they always grew higher, because when you're working on your nervous system, you are going to evolve regardless whether you have that big awakening. Like you said, you're going to have epiphanies, you're going to have heart openings. It is going to elevate your life 100%.
Well, you seem much more pleasant and open, and no, you weren't not pleasant, but you're much more at peace with yourself. How long I've known you? For 20 years now, right? And I've seen your evolution, and you have come to a place of balance, of something, of wanting to give back now. You're wanting to share what you've known with the world. And think this is your talent. This is your gift. So I'm happy.
I do feel it is a destiny for me. I actually, as a child, shortly before we met, I did actually dream of it as a kid. I had a dream where my girlfriend and I actually had a similar dream of the same night. She was staying over at my house, and she's on a very strong path as well, because we were on our path since we were 13. But I actually had a dream of exactly what the Kundalini experience was, where I went into this fiery, ecstatic bliss, and I lost consciousness of my ego self, the box of who I think I am. All my just little points of references, when there's so many, unlimited points of references to existence. But I went beyond that in the dream, and I was just in this ecstatic, blissful state. And the interesting thing in the dream, it was prompted by a kiss, and that's the same thing. It was prompted by a kiss in my friend. So there was this connection to sexuality. So I also feel that for whatever reason, which we all have, like doctors have specialties, as healers or teachers, we all have kind of our angle of specialty. And I feel that part of mine is integrating it with the sexuality, and in a very grounded way, so in a very heart-centered grounded
Also,
way.
moving that sexual energy up. I mean, I feel that is part of, at least the Taoist practice of sexuality, is to take the raw energy and move it up the spine in the microcosmic orbit, so the whole body is nourished with that energy.
Every single cell will be nourished with ecstasy. And it is also learning. I mean, all of the real mystical, the true traditions, it's about learning to build and focus energy.
Right.
That is, I mean, we all have this energy, but you start to build it so that you can expand you need to build energy to move into higher states of consciousness. And then how do we focus it? How do we use it? And there are pitfalls for sure. There are some people who build this energy, and then they literally can give Shakti, or they have magnetism. And it's just that same thing, like the force is there, and are you going to be a Darth Vader with it and manipulate, which we've seen. There's some great teachers that's been a pitfall. It doesn't mean they've healed people, been catalysts, and yet they fall into that. So you can't ignore the shadow, and choose how you're going to use the force.
I mean, there's people who haven't done enough work on their own ego, so their ego takes the credit for the Kundalini, which of course is beyond the ego. So it is about working on yourself, so you know that this is not about the personality. This is about this great life force that we're all connected to, that's starting to flow through someone as a presence of the divine. That's how I see it. So
you're right. That's what it is.
Yeah. So I think it's very exciting, and that you're actually teaching people this. You're teaching people how to tap into that presence, how to tap into the energy that's really sitting inside everyone, at the base of their spine, at the sacrum, at the base where that serpent of energy awakens, And a lot of the ancient, I was just listening or moderating a talk on ancient civilizations and sacred spots, and there's always this image of the snake, the serpent, that is part of the healing. And when the serpent has awakened in people, they call them the shining ones. The Anu is a word for the shining ones, and it's really this illumination of their cellular structures. I think their body starts to illuminate, and in the Taoist traditions, they talk about building the double, the etheric body, which becomes the immortal body, and or the rainbow body in Tibetan. And I think the Kundalini energy is the foundation for that. So this is really divine work, and I'm really happy you're doing that.
Well, it's exciting. I mean, it gives you such hope for humanity. And
Mm,
it is such an important thing for more of us to really experience that viewpoint from the top of the mountain of the possible potential for who we can be and what this earth plane can be.
mhm.
And so it's not about leaving the earth plane to a higher dimension. It's about creating a higher dimension here on the earth plane.
Right.
We have all the tools, we have all the means, and the main one is our heart. But we have to learn to activate, our we have to learn how to activate these higher centers and open our heart and open the Kundalini. And it is all possible. And whether you have the huge experience right off the bat or not, it's like I said, for years I had phenomenal experiences at heart openings and leading up to that. So the journey is always satisfying.
Yeah, I just want to say in the chat, Dana says that her Kundalini came up in phases over time. So that's also another way it actually awakens.
Well, it comes up in phases, and then suddenly there is a I'm not going to say final phase because the phases never end, but there is a final phase that marks the Kundalini in terms of, having certain experiences, in terms of defining it, of what the actual the final awakening of Kundalini. There isn't it's like besides the ecstatic experiences, there is that experience also of going into the light and beyond the ego consciousness, almost having, it's not almost, it is an ego death. And that is partly what I talk about, because that can be one of the challenges, because I've swung in and out of the ego death. And so there are certain things to navigate, but there are certain baseline experiences like I have had. I could say in essence that years prior, it was opening up in phases, but then there is the big opening. And there are certain things that, that a common denominators of people, that people have in that experience. But yeah, there is definitely, it's going to happen in different ways. Not everyone's going to have a sexual buildup like I did. And, it's going to come with its own fanfare, so to speak.
So is there another phase you feel like that you can get to, another level for you?
Oh, absolutely. And I'm going to talk about that. And, in the awakening, I absolutely 100% was shown. It's funny to be shown something and offered something that's another stage. But in that choice, you see what pulls you back. And I've had that experience. And I think that is one of the great things that I want to share, because there are certain things, and it does revolve around the ego and the ego death. Mm-hmm. And I actually had I was in a deep altered state one time with the Kundalini, where I went into like a breathless state. And in fact, I was again in a session with this masseur, and I literally stopped breathing, and he got scared. He's like, "You're not breathing." He actually made me come out of it, which was, that's another thing. It's important for people around you to know what's going on. So they, like we said, they don't hold you back or get scared and take you to the hospital.
They can support the process, of course. You want to support this process.
Yeah. And then, and that's another thing I'm going to talk about, which is sacred sitters. And so, but in this, my higher self told me, you can go as fast and as slow as you want. It's your choice. There were moments where I felt I had no choice. This is destiny. This is my higher self is like a dinosaur tail. It's just going to hit me with its tail, and that's it. I have no choice. But there are other times where you do have choice, and you need to learn to work with your fears and your ego. And that was something that I was given the choice. You can go as fast as slow. It does take, you continually have to build energy to keep moving into higher states, and you have to know how to contain it.
And how do you can you give us a hint about how you contain your energy as you're building it?
Well, one of the ways is having, and it's so simple actually, but it is very hard for people. One of it is not wasting your energy, finding ways.
Wasting it how? Yeah,
Well,
how would you waste?
I'll give you an experience. Your old self, which, you know, we have groups because of our habits of reacting. And
Right.
as we pop out of our ego box, all of a sudden, and the inner guru is giving us these messages energetically and, you know, mentally. Like I could hear it, but I was also feeling things. I'll give you an example. One time, my ex, who I was now ex, but in the end of a relationship, he wanted to vent. You know how does people use the scapegoat? I was having this experience, starting to go into one of my experiences after the Kundalini awakening, and he walked in and he was just yelling at me. I don't even know about what.
Right.
But and I'm the kind of person, I was gonna, you know, give it back to him because there was no reason. I don't remember the specific reason, but I remember thinking, what the hell is this about? And the way he's attacking me. And instead of going back at him, my inner guru just took me inward. Energy just started to swirl, but I'm not talking about little currents. Energy swirling, took me into a pinpoint, silent, still place in my being. So I was just so deeply connected and said, do not waste your energy. You need this to grow in consciousness.
So reacting would have been a total waste of your energy.
But the visceral and strength of the directive from my higher self was so strong. And that's what I'm saying. The dialogue becomes, your higher self comes to the forefront and said, do not waste your energy. You need this. And all of a sudden I explained to him, this is what I'm experiencing. I can't deal with this, whatever it is. And he just packed it all in and left, and he was fine. And he never mentioned it again because it really was nothing. It was him venting. You have to work with emotional static, but that's also part of working with the shadow side. You have to learn to work with your emotional static because that's an energy drain. Right. And it doesn't mean we are human beings, and all emotions have a purpose, by the way.
Except if they're patterns, which still have a purpose. Right. I mean, there could be patterns that people, you know, they're chemicals. Emotions are run by chemicals. And if you're always angry or sad, they become addictive chemicals. And when your body starts to not feel that, then you look for a reason to be angry, sad, depressed, or right. So
programming. And so there's certain things like that totally start to change that teach you how to conserve your energy, how to listen, you know, and part of what I talk about is awakening of the inner guru is the most important teacher you will have. You know, I can be a guide, that can be a guide. There's great energy catalysts that are gurus, and it's all valid. It's all been part of my journey, but ultimately awakening, you know, this inner guru is the goal.
Maybe I'll do a clubhouse with you before your workshop, but with a few other people I know who've also had awakening.
I would love that because like I saw the interview you did with Dorothy.
Yes. Yes.
Oh my gosh. It's like, I want to meet her. I have met one person actually. Interesting.
No, I have these two other women that are really good friends of mine who both had major Kundalini awakenings. One is now a healer. The other is channeling. I'll send you that video. And they didn't know anything about it. They were basically, you know, party girls or actresses or, you know, not really. And then boom, it just happened to them. And they are really outstanding. You
know, there's a actress that I was introduced to because a mutual friend of ours, you know, who George introduced me and said, you've got to meet this woman. She's had an awakening, is actually Catherine Oxenberg.
Oh yeah, I know. I met Catherine. Yeah, I know. Has she?
It was before my time. I didn't Dynasty, so I didn't see the program because
I met Catherine through George too, I think.
when I met her, oh my gosh, I could tell she had the real deal. And we were, when we were talking about our experience, we were having an energy dialogue. Every time she talked, I would get chills and goosebumps head to toe. And in a lunch time, and whenever I talked, same thing with her. We were so energetically on the same level because everything was awake, that our bodies were just confirming it energetically. We were having a dialogue verbally and energetically. And that was such a confirmation. It literally happened 20 times.
Wow, beautiful.
But there it goes again, So it was a confirmation that the energy is flowing, I guess. We were it's so classic. We were vibing, we're in the same vibe. So.
Well, one other way of bringing the energy up for me is with the breath. We talked about this. You're turning that energy into pure qi. The Chinese Taoists talk about the jing, which is the raw sexual energy, and you change that into qi, and then you create shen, or this spiritual power, which I think is what you're sort of saying, and what happened to you in more Hindu terms. I mean, everybody has different names for these, and we all are trying to understand our own process. But the breath is something that the Taoists talk about too.
Oh, so. Yeah. All traditions have, like I said, all mystical traditions that really want to open you up, because there's some traditions that don't deal with breath.
Yeah. And the breath is also a way of transmitting it, like Shaktipat. You can transmit it to someone as you charge that breath with like the cobra breath or the breath of fire. You just charge that up. And do you do that in your workshop? Talk about a little bit about what you actually will do in this workshop.
I reverse engineered how I was opened. And that's the best gift I can be, because it's my truth. And basically I combine the touch, like I said, of I teach the certain high charge points, combined with breath, combined with sound, and making sound to move the energy. The more of these things that you put into, the pot that are energy catalysts, there's also like taking some of these practices and doing them in water. That is, and how did I learn that? Is when the Kundalini opened, if I put on music and I would go meditate and do certain things in the bathtub, water is a catalyst.
What would that do, being in the bathtub for you?
Being in water, it is a catalyst. Energy moves quicker through water, oddly enough.
Does it calm it down or speed it up, or what does it do?
It's a catalyst. That's what I'm saying. There's certain elemental things, whether it's, all these ceremonies, most of the traditions on the planet always have traditions that work through the elements. And combining breath work or sound or prayers with water, with fire, with air. But on top of it, if you do, certain breath work, and then picture this, you're taking these different methods, but finding a way to combine them all together. It's just going to give your whole body it's a larger opportunity to open up. Instead of just doing one, instead of just doing breath, you're doing touch, you're doing sound, you're making sound. Making sound can move energy. So it's listening to sound, engulfing yourself, immersing yourself in sound can help open your channels. But also making sounds can open your channels. Certain high charge points can open your channels. And you have to realize that we do have blocks, and this is tension. So it could be
patterns, family issues.
But that's what it is. I'm just simplifying it to the base. So it could be psychological, which is it could be a psychological tension, which is family issues, mental grooves, bad habits mentally because we're raised, that keep us in a certain mind frame, but it can also actually be physical. It can also be dietary. So
Yeah.
that's why your whole life, if you live a holistic life, that's why a lot of these advanced cultures that had a golden age in spirituality, like the Chinese during the time of the Yellow Emperor, and in India, they created a whole lifestyle. It is a lifestyle,
And they created temples which would actually activate some of that energy, sacred site. Actually, a friend of mine just did a presentation on Humpy. Remember, we were at Humpy?
I love Humpy.
Humpy was magical, wasn't it? Yes.
Oh, I could live in Humpy. So
Well, nothing that, but their temple is great. You would have to
no,
live on a dirt floor with 6 other people. That's how they live there. But no, it was beautiful, though. The temple sites were beautiful. So, but those temples were made to activate that divine force in people.
yeah, sacred
And
geometry. That's what part of sacred geometry is, and absolutely. So you just want to bless you.
thank you. I muted myself for that sneeze. But anyway, no, there are great traditions that have been working for this energy. And I think most of the sacred mystical traditions are about this awakening. So again, to find this workshop, to register for it, go to, I'll put this in the chat. Where do you go?
Well, you could go to my website, which is the title of my book, God and the Evolution of Orgasm.com. That's my website. And there are 2 E's together between the and evolution. So God and the Evolution of Orgasm.com, spelled out exactly as is. Or you can go to my email. You can just email me. And that's godorgasms, plural, at gmail.com.
GODORGASMS
Yes.
orgasms.com. Okay. And you wrote a book. Your book is God and the Evolution of Orgasm, right?
The Evolution of Orgasm. Yes.
And this is the first workshop you're sort of doing on this part. And is this an ongoing series?
Yeah, I'm going to do different workshops. This one's mainly about the Kundalini because that's the baseline. If you wanted, it's like anything. It's the chicken or the egg. You do the practices and they help you start to open up to the experiences. But then the big Kundalini awakening, if you have it, it's going to make everything natural, like everything. And for some people, like it is different, but it will, depending on your proclivity and what you bring, what your gifts are, it will accentuate your gifts. And so mine is about being physical and sexual in this world. So right. I did not consciously choose that, by the way. I was been put in that position. And I see connect the dots, though, that may have, shown me that I've been, anointed for this in a sense. There's weird coincidences too. Like when my Kundalini was opening, I was hired to write a script about Masters and Johnson. It's not the TV series, but the movie script. And I'm the only one to have interviewed Virginia Johnson, who was the first sex therapist with her husband, to actually develop the field of sexology. Now, what are the odds that my awakening would come with this, with one of the main messages is about, the importance of sacred sexuality. And I was chosen to write a book, not a book, a movie, a script called Sexual Healing. And this is happening like at the same time.
And did that movie get made? What happened to that movie?
No, it got put on the shelf for different reasons. I mean, the movie business is very mercurial. It had A-list actors, and I was working for an Oscar-winning producer, and he was like, oh, this is amazing. But one of the interesting connect the dots to me is that I'm the only one to have interviewed Virginia Johnson to get her story. She never gave her story to anyone else. There's a TV series out there, and that was made based on a writer who never even interviewed her.
Right.
And they thought the real story is much better. And I got little, huge.
Let's work on that. No, let's work on that. That sounds like a great project.
I think it's time to bring it off the shelf, and you have to, the movie industry, like I said, it takes a lot. It can take sometimes 10 years for something to finally, it's its time. There's a timing to everything. But it's ready to be taken off the shelf. And also I'm the only one with the authorized story. So anyhow, but what are the odds that I'd be writing this and I'd be having this Kundalini awakening, and it would have come with this new sexual understanding of sexual evolution and orgasm evolution. It's almost, I saw it like a passing of the flame. There is a connect the dots there. I've also, growing up as a teenager, I've been so blessed to I've been able to touch and have have the grace in my life to meet great visionaries and great leaders before they pass on. So, I was able to meet Ram Dass. I was able to meet one of the first, Oscar Janiger and Timothy Leary, but all close to when they were going to die, which I found interesting. But as a teenager, and to be able to meet these people, and speak with them, not just meet them, but speak with them and have, some understanding. One of my mentors as a kid, I don't even know how I met him, but I was started on the path at 13, was someone named Oscar Janiger.
I've heard that name.
He wrote something called The 100th Monkey, and he also was the first, one of the first therapists to use LSD, and part of all these experiments in therapy setting. He gave it to Cary Grant and Esther Williams and all these people. But he'd say, hey, come over and chat. And I would go as a kid and chat with him, and he'd share stories about his clients. And this is in a time where, now there's a renaissance in regarding psychedelic therapy, but back then it was really closed. And
I know it was. Yeah.
He's like, this is the most undiscovered, the greatest undiscovered discovery of this last century. And he goes, in one or two therapy sessions, set and setting, knowing, having a trust with your client, not just taking it to party, I could help literally heal someone of a neurosis or a fear or whatever, where with other means I could teach them to cope. He goes, I've had clients for 10 years, I could teach them to cope, but in one or two private sessions, they could be relieved from this completely. He goes, it's really a phenomenal tool. We still have to explore how to use it, but I was getting this information. So I felt I was so lucky to be having interactions with these great wisdom keepers. Another one who I've met at different times is Stanislav Grof, who I love.
He was another psychedelic and breathwork teacher. Yeah, no. So, and also this Swami Kaleshwar, where we met, was also a master.
Yeah, exactly. So I've had all kinds of different teachers. Now, psychedelics, I've done them, and I've done ayahuasca and all that, but it's like, and I think they're completely valid and amazing therapies to incorporate into our healing paradigm, but it's not my path, so to speak.
Right. I felt a lot of Kundalini energy on ayahuasca. I felt blissed out on ayahuasca, actually. I felt like there was that same bliss that you talked about. And I think we're here to get that on our own. I mean, I think it opens the door, psychedelics. But once the door is open, then we need our own vitality and energy to maintain that.
I did ayahuasca before the Kundalini awakening and after.
And what was the difference?
Well, before I did have a death experience, and the thing with me is so far, whatever ayahuasca I'm on, I can actually navigate it where I can pull myself out of things. And so like I was on a pretty strong trip, but I had to be outside, and the teacher was like, oh, you can't, most people can't walk on this. And no, I had to be outside. I had to walk.
Yeah.
And I learned certain things about pulling myself out of it, of the journey that I wasn't liking I was having.
Right.
But when I did it afterwards, it was like what you said. I would go into like, it was just gratitude. I was blessing the world. It was a great experience, but I never had any visions. And it was just like a deep meditation for me that I have normally. So
And what about after you had the awakening? What was the ayahuasca like then?
Well, if anything, no, there was an element of, there was, what was, I felt it was very good for my body, actually. No, this is actually a really funny story. I had so like I said, all these people, I went down for like a 10-day retreat in the Amazon, and I did ayahuasca, and everyone's, people are having these great, going into dimensions, seeing beings. And I'm like, I'm having a good time. I'm in a deep, blissful, it's always blessing the world for me, and a lot of gratitude for the people who've been, my mentors and supportive on the path, which is beautiful, but nothing groundbreaking or phenomenal. That's kind of why I thought, well, this isn't my path. But one day I did feel it was good for me physically. One day everyone kind of had come down off their journey. We'd all kind of come down the tail end. A lot of people had left the big ceremony, Palapa, and I had a gas attack, a fart attack. So, but it was like dinosaur farting. Okay. It's like,
thank you for being so open. Yeah.
No, but they say that it's a kind of purging, like, in Montagnia's thing, if it's a belch or some kind of gas, it's a release of energy. I don't even know. Didn't feel bloated. I don't even know where this came from. It was like a T-Rex was farting over and over and over. Luckily, most everyone had left, and I just went, they had bathrooms there, and I just went in there, and I would just like fart like a T-Rex, and I just laugh. I just go, ha ha, because what can you do? It's like,
that was a purging, but was there any like spiritual awareness that was different when you were on the ayahuasca after the Kundalini awakening?
It was actually just more of a reaffirmation of what I had already connected to on Kundalini. And reaffirmations are just as valid because they keep deepening that groove of connection. It was just definitely maybe being more connected to the cycles of nature. But I did have experience on ayahuasca that taught me a lot about will, the power of will. I was actually in a ceremony that was very strong. This was outside of the 10-day ceremony. And I was with a boyfriend at the time it was his first time. And he had a really, really bad trip, like bad meaning dark. Bad can be good. A bad trip on ayahuasca, they say, oh, Mother Ayahuasca, she's giving you what you need. You're going to have big growth. But when you're going through it, it can be scary. And he actually was having like a big black blob come to him and try to suffocate him. So you can imagine how scary that is. Now I'm sitting there, and I took him into the jungle to do this, and I'm feeling responsible, obviously. The trip there I wasn't seeing anything, but it was very disorienting and strong. And everybody in the tent was having a strong trip. But my boyfriend started to scream. He was like, help me get out. And the shaman lady I don't think she was very good. And she actually like left. And later on the next day, we were told that she got sick and had some kind of whatever, and she had to leave. But no one even saw her leave, but she left and abandoned a lot of people who were going through a lot of, strong experiences. And so I'm with him, and he's screaming, and everyone else is in the tent is getting frustrated with him because he's freaking
They're
them out.
giving them a bad trip, right? Yes.
They're already having hard trips, and he's giving them a worse trip. I felt like they wanted to kill him. And
Right.
but what happened in the end was I'm like, and he's like, take me to the hospital. I'm like, we're in the middle of the jungle. But I had to pull myself out completely, because even though I wasn't tripping, it was very disorienting. It was very strong stuff. And I had to will myself out of whatever I was experiencing and to be there for him, you know. And again, that goes under the sacred sitter thing. Our sacred sitter, the shaman, left us. So I was able to luckily pull out and be there for him.
Well, let
And
me ask you, do you think you've gotten higher, more blissed out on Kundalini or on ayahuasca LSD?
Kundalini.
Kundalini is a much better drug. It's not even, it's your own chemicals. It's your own awakening. Yeah.
It's much stronger. It's deeper. It's when the Kundalini opens, it doesn't the experience, the intensity of the experience. I had experiences, peak experiences, where I'd be in altered states from Kundalini for days or weeks, you know. So it's, you know, it's not just you're on it for 5 hours and then you come back and integrate it. It's you're sometimes going through this. I had a near-death experience for 4 days.
On Kundalini, with Kundalini.
And so,
well, I'm just going to promote that workshop again so people know this has been a really great conversation, very informative. This is it again. This is a weekend intensive with Suraya Erikkson, August 27th to 29th, 2021. The Arch of the Great Awakening. Why the Ark, or the Ark of the Great Awakening? Why you call it that?
Well, because there is, you know, the phase where you're preparing your vessel. Then there's usually some kind of ego death before a pre-ego death. Then there's the awakening. Then there's the rebirth, and then there's the reintegration. And all these stages are things that I want to share how to navigate, because I went through it. And there were times where I wish I had had a guide. And so I just want to kind of put it together, what it's going to look like, the tools you can have, you know, how to navigate and prepare, what to look forward, and techniques that will help you open up the Kundalini. Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
One more thing. What is the K-spot awakening?
Well,
what is
that's the technique that I put together based on the way I was opened, where it deals with touch and sound and breath to open up the K-spot. Now, the K-spot is the spot that
base of the spine?
Yeah, well, yeah, you could say it's the base of the spine, but it also can be in the front, in your belly.
Oh.
So, and when the Kundalini opened, it awakened my K-spot. And for me, the energy catalyst that helped me open the Kundalini, he just touched me. He hardly did anything. He just touched me on the K-spot, and that's when it shot open. So I'm working on building energy in the K-spot through preparing your vessel, opening up your channels, through these different sensory mediums and breath work combined, to then build the energy and the impetus for the K-spot to open. And then afterwards, with the Kundalini, the K-spot becomes like awakened. It's sensitized. And that is also a doorway in, for me, both sexually and spiritually, is still the K-spot. It became an erogenous zone. It became almost like, this is going to sound really weird, it became like a clitoris in the lower belly. So
the belly, it's for you, it's in the belly.
Well, in the lower belly, but when the Kundalini opening, the entire body became sensitized, because every single cell has that ecstatic awareness. So everything became an erogenous zone. But again, there are always certain high charge points on the body that are more of a doorway in. And the K-spot.
that's it for you. That's where your spot is. But in other people, it might be somewhere else, right?
Well, it's like I said, it's the whole body awakened to a certain degree. And if I work with that, like one day, if he's working on a certain part of my body, is going to open me up more than another. Now, and it translates into sexuality. It depends where your block is that day that will awaken it. The K spot is an energy center that awakens in general, it's almost like saying, oh, you've awakened your third eye, you've awakened your K spot, where
Right.
it is the doorway into opening up your sexual energy, and it's a doorway into like if I'm in a sexual experience, and the Kundalini will open in different ways at different times. It could just be from whatever's going on, and it's like I said, different every time. But touching that K spot will, when I'm aroused, will open the Kundalini. And it will also feel at the same time like as much of a nerve center, sexual nerve plexus as the clitoris.
Mhm.
So,
Right.
so I think we all have the K spot. But different spots, like I said, depends where your block is, where you need to unwind. And a lot of body workers and people who've been on this path know that one day, like sexually, for instance, one day, the doorway in for me to open up the Kundalini and the sexual bliss so that I'm then in a full body orgasm might be the psoas muscle. But then once that's open and everything, then on top of it, if you work on the K spot, then it's like, you know what I'm saying? It does awaken a new, erogenous zone.
No, great, beautiful. Thank you so you work on that with people in these workshops, and
K is for Kundalini. It's the K spot.
okay. No, this is great. We're getting a lot of good. Do you think there's such a thing as a premature Kundalini awakening? Someone writes in the chat.
I've heard, well, since we live in a universe of so many possibilities, I would say probably yes, but I'm not going to say it's going to be a bad outcome. It just might be more difficult. If there's a book, and a lot of that I was given after I had Kundalini awakening about Gopi Krishna wrote, and Dorothy, that woman, mentioned it. Your Kundalini can open, but due to your blocks and things like that, sometimes it's a little unbalanced, but you could say it opens unbalanced, or you could say that your energy channels are still a little blocked and you need to unblock a certain side, or you need to work on your shadow side a bit more so that it opens up in a way that isn't so challenging. So you will, depending on where you're at, not everyone we're all going to be at different places with our shadow side in when it opens. So it could be more challenging for some people.
Well, it's been really nice. Let's do a workshop together sometime.
I so look forward to that, Alan, because
okay. I'll be out in LA probably for the expo coming up next year. So we could do so. But let's stay in touch, and maybe we'll work on some films that we talked about, right?
Let's do that Kundalini panel with these other women.
Oh, yeah.
I would love to do that.
I'll do that on Clubhouse this way before your event, and we'll promote your event.
I can't wait. That to me is so exciting to, talk more to other people as well.
I'll send you a video of these interviews I did with some of these other people, and you see if you resonate with them.
I love that.
But thanks for being so open, and
it's the only way to learn is sharing our truth.
Yeah, and just being honest and more yourself than ever. You are more yourself than ever.
That's what it's about, right?
I guess it's what it's all.
For farts and all.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. Yes.
Full body orgasm. So.
Do they come together sometimes?
That would be a funny thought, but
Well, thank you, though. Let's stay in touch anyway. This is posted on New Realities. We got a lot of interested people. Keep asking that question. I am. If you're not the body, who are you then? No, someone says, keep asking a question. Yes, who are we? We are the actual divine Kundalini energy that's in the body.
and you know what? You are way more than you can even imagine until you've had when you really open up the Kundalini and connect, you're like, your mind that once dreamed of it will still be blown away as to what it really is.
Yeah, and it's right here, right now. You can just feel the bliss just sitting in the space of your own being. That I think is the first step, is to be present with the energies that are right here, right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan.
And we'll do it again.
Yes, I can't wait. Have fun in the Hamptons. Bye.
Thanks. Talk to you soon. Bye. Bye. Thanks everyone for watching online. You can look at my Kundalini Awakening series on my playlist on my New Realities .com, youtube.com/New Realities, and on my website coming soon, New